the one guy everybody can agree to hate in Christianity is the money-grubbing televangelist or the really big mega church, and why don't they sell that and give it to the poor? Well, that's what Judas said.
Hey guys, welcome to Conversations with Fabulous People. I'm Mike Maeshiro, and I'm here today with John Crowder. Those of you who don't know who John is, buckle up. We've got some great stuff to talk about today, but one thing I want to make sure you know is we've got a live studio audience today. So if you hear somebody laughing off screen, just know they're here. It's all right. They're going to do their best to try and be as accommodating as possible to this shoot, but they're here with us. John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Mike.
Thank you. So I want to just kind of share with the audience a bit how I got exposed to you, so you can know that as well. To whatever degree. Yep. John and I have never hung out before. I've gone to his schools and heard him speak several times, read his books, so a couple of them. So I'm a huge fan. This man has changed my life. I was in second year at BSSM, and my roommate was in first year, and he was a big fan of yours. And so he and I would theologically wrestle like almost every night for a few months, like a couple months probably. And I started getting really riled up. And I grew up in the church. I prided myself on not being religious because I came to Bethel, and so that I had to let go of a lot of religion to even end up in that place. Yeah. But he was saying things that even in that place in my life were offensive. And I wouldn't have said that they were offensive, but I was offended. And I didn't know that. I thought he was just ignorant. Yeah. Or not very theologically based or whatever. And so we would argue and wrestle through stuff, and I'd bring up scripture and be like, what about this? If that's true, then what do you do with this in the Bible? And he just wouldn't answer. He wouldn't try and make it make sense or whatever. And I'd just get really frustrated. I'm like, how can you be a responsible theologian when this is in the Bible and you're just not regarding it? He's like, I don't know what to do with that. I just know this. I'm like, yeah, but you sound like an idiot. Yeah. You sound, and I had all these strong, offenses against him. And anyway, I remember one night especially, he was basically advocating for us trusting in God, not in our ability or our efforts or our reputation or whatever. And we were arguing, and I was like, you can't, God wants you to show up and you need to do stuff, is what I was coming at in my mind, right? But I noticed somewhere in the conversation there was this thing coming out of me that was aggressive and wanting to destroy this person almost. I wasn't mad at him, but there was something angry in me, and I was like, what is happening? And I logically took a step back and was like, what Caleb is advocating for is actually freer than what I'm advocating for. And if where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom, it sounds like he's actually on God's side right now. Yeah. What am I doing? And I kind of became self-conscious in that moment, or self-aware, whoa, something's happening here I wasn't aware of that isn't awesome. And so from that moment on, I became more submissive and started listening to him, which is when I started reading Mystical Union. And I remember crying a few times as I read that book because I couldn't believe just the profundity and how could this have been kept a secret from me for so long? And it wasn't just information. That was what was so fascinating to me was it was like there was a veil over my eyes that I literally couldn't understand this, even if it was preached to me before. I had too many things in place to prevent me from actually being able to receive that. Yeah. So anyway, I preach the gospel on a regular basis now, whether I'm in a church service or not. It just comes out. When I'm teaching my team, I'm constantly referring back to Jesus and the finished works, and we're referencing that for I hope everything that we're going after, right? Yeah. And so you have profoundly influenced my influence in the way that I'm impacting people in my life. So for that, I'm so grateful and honored that you would join me today. And just to give some context, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess my first question for you, just to start off light and shallow, is...
light and shallow is easy for me.
Well, I was being a little bit ironic because I want to know, if... I know obviously your message is huge and you have so many ways of expressing this, but for people who maybe have never heard from you before or read any of your books or know anything about you, what would you say your message is to the world when it comes to Jesus and the gospel and Christianity especially?
Yeah, well, man, I think we'd be in so much better shape if Jesus was our hermeneutic. Now, a lot of people don't even, what is hermeneutic? That's a big theological word, but it's our lens for how we understand everything about God. It's our lens of how we understand scriptures. It's our understanding of if we just started with Jesus. I love the Bible. I believe the Bible are the words of God, but the Bible is not the word of God. Jesus himself is the word of God. He's the ultimate text. And if we could read Leviticus through a lens of, hey, this is pointing to Jesus, man, it would just change everything, because we so tend to flip back on this concept that of our relationship with God being this bilateral relationship where there's him and there's me, and I have to hold up my end of the whole deal. And there is a bilateral relationship, but the God side and the human side are both fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus is our meeting point. And so that takes all the performance off of the table. It takes all of the the striving off of the table. It takes all of our just endless attempts to repent ourselves in circles and just relax and actually engage in relationship versus this sort of outward dynamic of doing. So I think if we could just bring it back to the person of Jesus and not just what Jesus did as an act in his death and resurrection, but in his very person, back to the incarnation itself, that he is, again, the meeting point of God and man. So I think as we recenter that, and I've come to this point now where it's almost a reaction that's involuntary, where if I come to this point where I have this question or some theological pondering in my mind, my brain goes to, okay, where's Jesus in this question? Mm-hmm. And then if you start with that, man, it just tends to bring such a cohesion that I think we have all these metaphysical, philosophical concepts that we're trying to piece together and cobble this God picture together in our mind. Mm-hmm. But if we realize God's already revealed himself in Christ, there's nothing hidden from us. And it's so easy that a child can get it, but it's still deep enough that it's the glory of kings to search out. So you never get bored. There's always this mystery, but it's not the frustration of an unrevealed mystery. As we look at Jesus, we realize God has desired to completely reveal himself and has done that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that people who are religious, when I say that, I don't mean like they have faith that they practice. I mean like there's this thing governing their lives where they're obsessed with and bound by rule following, performing external, symptoms or whatever to measure up to a standard or something. Sure. It seems like these people who are ingrained in this thought process have some trouble swallowing what you're telling them. Is that true?
Yeah, I would define religion because if you just mention religion on the street to your average person, they just think, oh, you go to church or whatever. Right. But I define religion as in a negative sense as our attempt to set ourselves right with God. Mm-hmm. And the gospel invalidates that. The gospel tells us that God has never desired to be in the religion business, that he rolled up his sleeve, he saved us single-handedly, that it's all about what he's accomplished. It's not about our attempts to get into something. Even the idea of when we get saved or come to Christ, we have this idea that the gospel is inviting Jesus into our life. No, the gospel's the good news that he's already brought us into his life. Mm-hmm. We've just been blind to it. And so it takes all of our efforts off the table. Now, when you start to talk about this, people think you're endorsing apathy, like we do nothing. Well, my goodness, I don't know how many hours a week I work. We're not endorsing apathy, right. But you're coming at things from a different angle. Rather than trying to arrive at something, it's out of this revelation that we have it all, that he's in us, that grace doesn't endorse apathy, but grace is literally the divine influence of God upon man. It's not just this cover-up, like, oh, I don't see your sins, you're covered by grace. No, it's this influence, like a wind filling a sail, and here's Paul, the grace apostle, outworking all the other guys, and there's this drive where it's the power within you, but it's not coming from a place of performance. Again, it's not coming from a place of striving. It's like you actually enjoy what you're doing.
Totally.
And I mean, if we actually enjoyed what we were doing in the church, man, people might want to be part of it. So totally. The problem is we're doing a lot of redundant stuff and a lot of religious stuff. So we're trying to reaccomplish a lot of things that God's already done. So in our works, which are all called the good works, but they're not salvific work. It's not things we're doing to get ourselves right with God or get closer to God. I mean, how do you get closer to your Siamese twin? We're one with him in Jesus. And so when we, again, bring it back to what Jesus has done and who he is, it really does invalidate a lot of redundancies that are religious. And so, yeah, people do get scandalized by that, and the gospel is still a scandal. And we often think because there's a church on every corner that people aren't scandalized by the gospel anymore. But just because there's a steeple doesn't mean the gospel's being preached. I mean, there is a lot of what I call American folk religion that's do this to get in the club or do this to please God, and man, it's so night and day from what the real gospel of grace is.
Yeah. Fascinating. So what would you say to someone then, because I know this is one of my things that I was like
yeah,
what about like the whole responsibility thing, or you have to guard your heart, brother, or whatever, like coming from this place of I actually need to be bringing something to the table in order for me to be taking God seriously or be sincere or something. Sure. What would you say to that?
I mean, I definitely believe there's personal responsibility. I mean, we don't just go on a weekend coke bender in Colombia or something. I mean, everybody has responsibility, and I think as we mature, but even in that, there's a desire to do what's right. God changes your wants, your desire, your will to align with Him, and actually, although it's a change, it's really awakening what you always wanted deep inside anyways. And so again, it's not that we don't have any participation, because relationship is participational. It's just that participation is not trying to get included. It's not trying to get closer. It's more of a response, a responsive, because He loves me, because He owns me. I'm not my own. Then what? How am I designed? What is the blueprint for my life to live? And so out of that flows the fruit that I think a lot of religious people are looking for fruit, but almost in, again, a utilitarian way. Whereas in this revelation that everything's accomplished in Jesus, we're one. We actually fruit becomes really almost an effortless byproduct. It's not that we aren't responsible, but I'm not sitting there all day thinking, what's the responsible decision? It's a lot more easy and natural and authentic, I believe. Yeah.
So did you always know that you were going to be this, like, do they call you a radical grace preacher? Is that what you are?
Oh, I've been called a lot of things.
What have you been called?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. I've been called a demon in a meat sack. I've been called a heretic. I've been called... I can't even remember. No, I've been called a lot of things. I mean,
Was any of this to your face?
We've had protesters, like, outside of our meetings holding up a false prophet. I didn't even know I was a prophet.
Nice.
No, I think a lot of people, we live in an information age where people get sound bites, and people don't hear out what's actually being said. So if you begin to challenge one area of somebody's theology, it could actually be a domino effect, because it's like you open one can of worms and you start to pull the string of a sweater, the whole thing comes apart. And we start to realize, I was missing it on this area. But then it's like, so I may have had it wrong in this area. And then the whole thing starts to flip on its head, and that's very intimidating.
Totally.
It's extremely intimidating if you're already invested in ministry.
Right.
And you've been in this for a few years.
Because then you have lose, right?
Yeah, and you gotta toss out your old material. You gotta sort of change the
website.
Yeah. So I'd especially encourage young people that are just, maybe have a call to ministry, or they're, feeling that they need to, or that's an area that the Lord's calling them to. Be willing to always be teachable, always be open and flexible in what the Lord's showing you. But yeah, no, I've been called a lot of things. But we definitely had seasons where there was more controversy than others, and we've been controversial for a number of reasons, a number of different doctrinal points that we stood for. But again, the big challenge is when the whole ship just seems like it's about to tank. Sometimes we have to realize that the whole thing has actually been upside down, and we need to rewrite the ship. So you got to take your time. I think if something is being provoked in you, it's okay to be patient and just take it a step at a time and work your way through it. And the Lord's not in a hurry. I mean, every one of us is a heretic at some.
Totally.
We all have areas where we're not thinking correctly, and so that's just part of our growth. And actually, the word repentance, which is not a biblical word, by the way, that's a Latin word borrowed from our Catholic brothers, which means penance, pay for your own sins, with the prefix "re" at the beginning to get extra mileage out of it.
Wow.
But the real word in Greek is metanoia, which means change your mind. And so really that's what, like, even learning and good Jesus-centered theology, it's all about changing our mind and realizing how good God is and what He's accomplished and who we are thanks to Him. And that does change our outer lives and how we play with others and how we act. But it all begins with learning. We always need to be growing and stay humble and teachable. That's such a powerful thing, I believe. Yeah,
totally. Did you always know you're going to be a gospel preacher?
Oh, I didn't know what I was going to do, actually, for quite a few years.
At what point, what did you think you were going to be, if it wasn't this?
Yeah. I was living in Alaska, and I worked at a newspaper for a few years, and I felt like I had to write this book. I had some revelation, and I wanted to get out. And as I was actually writing my first book, The New Mystics, as I was writing the book, I started to realize, I'm gonna be traveling and preaching. And I never knew that, so I wasn't like trying to start a ministry. A lot of guys they get a a website and a business card before they get a Bible, and so I wasn't trying to make something happen. It was just I actually got too busy with needing to write this book. I knew I needed to write this book that I didn't have time to work, so I took some time off of my job. I wrote this book, and then before you knew it, just things blew up, and I was sort of dropped into this charismatic conference circuit. And I went from preaching to maybe 30 people at the local church that I attended to overnight preaching to like 2,000 people. So it was crazy. Wow. And because I hadn't like sort of climbed that ladder of mingling with all the right important people to get to that platform, as often we see in ministry, it was just, I get thrown into it and I had nothing to lose. So the Lord just was able to sort of use me as a big colonic cleanse to the charismatic church in a way, because I didn't take myself very seriously. Like I was having fun. It was all about just the joy and the presence of God. And I think if we're not having fun in ministry, if we don't have joy, like let's do everybody a favor and quit while we're ahead.
Totally.
So it's not just what we teach, but it's also how we teach it. We really need to be, and that's why we can't be overly critical of people because everybody's got their doctrinal places that we're all, again, learning and growing. We need to be adamant and I think strong in the revelation of Christ and Him crucified and really help people to come into that understanding. But at the same time, we don't want to be like so vehemently angry when people don't get it. I mean, we need to stay in this place of joy, in this place of peace, because people are just so confused, and that's going to speak what we're carrying as loud as the actual theology of this as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Why did you write The New Mystics? What was your goal with that?
I was just always intrigued by all these supernatural stories through church history. And when I first became, I grew up in a church as a kid, very legalistic Pentecostal church as a kid. That's where I grew my fond affinity for religion. But then by the time I was in college, all that had done was drive me into drugs and stuff. And so I had this radical encounter with the Lord and was just like delivered from all these drugs and lifestyle, and lost all my friends, and it was just a radical experience. And real early on, I remember I just randomly found this thick Catholic church history book. Now, I had not been exposed to anything outside of my little stagnant stream of Bible Belt Pentecostalism, and I didn't realize the church is a lot broader than there are many different traditions. And I'm reading these stories of guys who are floating off the ground, and guys who are just doing these incredible supernatural stories that get clinically removed from our seminary textbooks in the Protestant world, because during the Reformation, it's like, miracle was just written off altogether. And so right from the start, I just had this intrigue with these bizarre things from church history. And fortunately, I got plugged in with sort of the renewal stream that was happening in the 90s, the Toronto renewal, and people experiencing the tangible presence of God's joy and the Father's love and all these things. So I was wide open for real experiential encounter with the Lord, but going and seeing this history just really blew me out of the water, and I realized so many people were disconnected from our past and our roots in that sense. And so, that was just something, a passion that was on my heart. And that was a big part of that particular book.
Have you always had this propensity to want to help other people understand what you're excited about?
I think so. I think part of it for me is I would realize that people just weren't getting some things, and so it wasn't like I needed to be the teacher guy. I think for some people they need to be heard, they need a platform. But for me, I didn't really want that. Initially I just wanted to write books. I didn't even think I could speak. And so then I realized I enjoyed speaking, but I did realize I actually know a few things that could help some people out, but not in a this hierarchical I'm a genius or something, but I just knew these guys could use to hear this, and so that was really the emphasis of my first book.
Have you ever been involved in theater or drama?
I think I tried out for the drama club in high school or something. I would like to try stand-up comedy at some point. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, one of the people on my team last night said they felt like they were at a comedy club.
Yeah.
Or you were just so funny consistently throughout that they felt like they were at a comedy show. And I was like, oh, that's probably true. I was so distracted by the truth hitting me that I didn't realize.
But I think if you were in a comedy club, it'd be a little difficult, because I think, as I mentioned last night, usually for Christians, the first thing to go is the sense of humor. So your jokes don't have to be that great to get a laugh in church, I think. I don't know. That's just maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah, the standard's a little low.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah.
But I've noticed over the years you have this flair for the dramatic. And the theatrical, like I remember the first mystical school I ever went to that you put on in Chico, I got to the first session and I was like, what? You were wearing like a priest's robe with the collar thing and everything with beads, and I was like, what's happening right now? Like, what? And you preached the whole session like that. And I don't even know if we got a ton of explanation as to why you looked like that. And you had a suitcase full of all these Bibles that you'd pulled out and randomly would use while you were teaching. And I remember watching some of your YouTube videos, and you would do some strange antics on YouTube that I thought were hilarious and so entertaining, but also like, this guy's a preacher. What? Like, it had such a strange like combination. Can you tell us a bit about where that flair is coming from?
Yeah, my goodness, I don't know. We definitely have a bit of a costume budget that we have to deal with. I think for me, it's just, again, having fun. I almost have to keep myself entertained at times, because I almost feel like if I'm not enjoying this, if I'm not having fun, then I'm gonna get into this sort of, I just don't want to get in that clock in 9 to 5 mindset with ministry. And so I think that's part of it. I think just bringing the joy, the party, the fun, and sort of trying to expose people to this element that this should be a lot more fun than just sitting in rows and having a lecture every week. And as much as I'm a teacher, I love teaching and we need teaching. I'm not discounting teaching. But I definitely believe that heaven is a party and that there is this celebratory aspect of, one of C.S. Lewis's Narnia books, he has Bacchus come in, who is like the god of wine or whatever. And obviously C.S. Lewis is not endorsing paganism or whatever, but it's funny in Narnia how he sort of shows that, if you only look at that aspect, then you do get into that idolatry. But he's trying to highlight there is this revelry aspect, that there is a glimpse of that in God, this revelry aspect that I think we tend to miss. And for me, I just, I don't know, I just have fun.
I've heard through the rumor mill, apparently there is one.
Yeah.
You're familiar with it. That you're an amazing dad.
Well, thank you.
I hear Lily raves about you as a dad.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are some things in your mind that constitute being a good dad?
Oh, goodness. I think you just got to lose sight of yourself. I think so many people, it's, I need to be happy and this and that. And I think with kids, as soon as you have a kid, man, so you've got some feces on your shirt, like big deal. Like that's the last of my cares today that I've got, baby poop on my shirt or whatever. And your first kid, you've got all these contraptions and big plastic like carriages and bags and everything. And after you hit like 3 kids, dude, you're just walking around with a diaper in your back pocket. And I think you just loosen up a little bit. I think parenting really helps you. We talk a lot about, not being selfish or self-centered. I think parenting really helps with that because you're not even trying to not be self-centered. You don't even have time to think about it. To introspect, your introspection. Yeah, you're in it to keep this little thing alive. But it's so beautiful. And then you realize, man, this is what it's all about. This is the heart of God, this other giving love. This is what we're made for. And this is, there's nothing as satisfying as just totally losing sight of yourself and just being, enraptured by this other person's well-being, So I think, and I think that's something that we all get to participate in life, whether we have kids or not. But it's definitely parenting gives you a real perspective on God's nature in that sense, for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I also heard through the rumor mill that you've had some pretty radical experiences with God in the area of money and provision.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to take away from some of the stuff you're going to cover in the mystical school that maybe you haven't talked about yet, but I would love to hear any stories you might have about the Lord showing up in your beliefs, especially about money, but also like just tangibly how He's provided along the way, if you have anything you'd want to share in that area. Sure,
yeah, absolutely. We lived in Alaska. Now, Alaska, it's not that everybody is living in a quaint log cabin in Alaska. We were pretty poor in Alaska. We lived in a trailer. John Crowder was trailer trash. Okay, so we were in this trailer. and no offense if you are in a trailer, but we were in a refrigerated trailer. So beat that. And we had we're popping kids out and it's not that we were irresponsible. I mean, I had a job and everything, but we struggled in this area. And I was at the generation, like the 80s televangelism scandals with all the TV preachers, like finding out they had a golden dog house and, you know, they burned money in their fire just to warm the place, like El Chapo or something. I don't know. But it was, you know, it was in the generation where you just didn't mention money and preacher in the same sentence. People were really critical. And I was really critical, and I had like one of these Benny Hinn mockumentary videos where they just make fun of him because he's a TV preacher, and they've got like dollar signs in his eyes, cha-ching, and all this. And I would, you know, I like humor, and so I would laugh at that kind of stuff, and I didn't really think much about it. But I was a faithful legalistic tither, but I just was still critical in that area. And I remember we had this guy who comes to town at one point, and he was just talking about money nonstop, and it was really bugging me. And then I really just felt like the Lord showing me that I was being critical. And I remember something that Rick Joyner said years ago. He says, criticism is the number one thing that holds you into poverty. And I was just thinking, man, I just do not want to be critical. And it's not, I just decided I was going to write the biggest, fattest check to this guy. And it's not that I liked the guy very much, but I just wanted, you know, I just wanted to offend my own offense, to come out of that criticism thing with money, because we get so critical. You see so many people, if a church is really big, or, you know, people hate, you know, the one guy everybody can agree to hate in Christianity is the money-grubbing televangelist, or the really big mega church, and why don't they sell that and give it to the poor? Well, that's what Judas said, you know. And so there was just this criticism that I felt, that I realized was just not there, wasn't supposed to be there. And man, we write this huge check, and then all of a sudden, within 2 weeks' time, I'm getting telephone calls. People giving me tens of thousands of dollars to start being able to do missions work, to start doing evangelism campaigns around the world. And from there, something just clicked, and I just started to realize, man, this whole thing of new covenant giving, it's like this is a beautiful and supernatural thing. And so we just got really addicted to it, where we're just chucking money at any ministry that had a drop of oil on it, and before you know it, man, it was just our income in 1 year doubled, and then it doubled again. It was just crazy. It got to the point where I had to be quiet, because if people see you in ministry and you're successful, man, they want to crucify you. But it's not that, you know, well, that's because he's taking these offerings up all the time. That's how the money. No, it's like crazy supernatural stuff would happen. I'd have a dream of a stock to invest in. Or I just walk into an Office Depot store, Office Max one day, and this person comes up, doesn't even know me, from Adam, and says, hey, I just haven't paid my tithe in months. I need to give this to you. Doesn't even know who I am. It's like, do you know me? It's like, no. It's like, please don't Google me. Thank you. But yeah, so I think there was this thing that God instilled in terms of an expectancy for prosperity, but also just not being critical in that area. I think so many people, it's so easy to get jealous or compare ourselves or criticize people. And, you know, Creflo Dollar wants a $60 million airplane. Well, give him a $50 billion submarine for all I care. It's not my deal. Like it doesn't matter what where's my role in that, to be the critic, you know? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but it's not my call. And so I think as long as we just don't get into that role of criticism, that's a huge thing. I mean, there's another biblical example, you know, where David's wife was critical and she was barren, you know, and so there's this thing of just coming in a different spirit with the money stuff, where it's like if you're at lunch or whatever, you jump on the bill, you know. If you're you're out with your friends or whatever, if you can do it, man, just be the first one, fight them over this stuff. And it's a different spirit than like, oh, you're going to pay for that one, you know. It's a different thing. I think you can have fun with that, but it's just a whole different atmosphere that starts to come on your life, where you're thinking in terms of wanting to be the resource provider, knowing that you are a resource provider, that you have this infinite supply, and actually acting like it and living like it, versus feeling like you're in lack and need. For sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, so I've got this funny, strange thing that I'm still trying to sort out in my own life. People ask me, what do you do for fun? So I think, okay, what do I do apart from what I do work-wise is probably what they're asking me. Yeah. I like watching movies. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd like reading a good book, or going for a walk by myself, or going for a hike.
Yeah.
But I think my honest answer is I love doing the work that's on my plate. I love doing it. I actually get a lot of value and pleasure out of it. Not to say that I rest while I'm doing it, because I need to rest as well. Yeah. But that is like probably my biggest like fun-filled thing, is when I'm doing the things that I like am passionate about. How would you answer that question? What do you do for fun? When people ask you that, what do you say to them?
Yeah.
What does John Crowder do for fun?
There's definitely something of a divine ambition, and that word ambition is sort of a dirty word in our society today. But I think that Paul, he said that he wanted to go to minister to the Romans, but he hadn't been able to get there yet because he used the word ambition driving him to preach all throughout the Mediterranean. And he said, there's nowhere left for me to preach, like from Jerusalem all the way up through Greece. I mean, he'd gone everywhere. He's just like this driven guy. And I think there is a healthy, holy, divine ambition that goes along with what we were saying earlier in terms of that grace, like a wind filling your sails. So I do enjoy my work, and I am constantly busy getting ideas and working on our weekly Jesus Trip videos or monthly web conferences we do. You always producing stuff, and writing and doing our magazines. We've got a lot on our plate. But at the same time, I also love to unplug and just zone out and do something totally mindless. Just watch Netflix and binge a season in a day of something. And just like, but I have to be careful with that because if I do get into a season, I will binge the whole thing, right? So it's like if I have some work to do, but there's times where I'd like to take time off. This past year I actually did sort of a modified sabbatical, and I was off quite a bit. But I wasn't just studying, and I did have time to read, but man, I was just really legitimately just trying to rest, not do stuff. Just, again, watch shows or hang out with buddies, that kind of thing. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any good Netflix shows you watched recently that you're willing to share with us?
Oh man, there's so many. The problem is, you recommend one and people think you're
you
a creep.
approve of this.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, never mind.
I like true crime things. Those are kind of fun. But I like a lot of different things. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. What is a question you tend to get a lot from people when they're coming up to you on the prayer line or in your emails or whatever? What do you feel like is the most common question you end up getting in ministry?
Ooh, it's probably changed a bit over the years. They're more diversified. For a long time, the question, and I mentioned this last night in our event, but for a long time people would say, how do I get drunk in the Spirit? Because that was sort of the MO people had of our ministry, is they're the guys who are always experiencing this, Holy Spirit intoxication. And so people would say, how do I get drunk? And I think a lot of times it's how the question's asked that you realize where people are coming. Totally. How do I get drunk in the Spirit? And so again, we would say, look, if you're trying to get drunk in the Spirit, that's divination, right? You're trying to climb up into God, trying to get into God's presence. And man, a lot of charismatic Christian bookstores are full of divination books, steps and formulas of how to get in the glory, get more anointed, whatever. But in reality, but call it what it is, But in reality, I'm not trying to get into the presence of God. I'm not trying to get drunk in the Spirit. I'm realizing I already am. I'm realizing, thanks to Jesus, I have the full enchilada in me. And that's where faith comes by hearing. It's like we haven't been told we already have it. We've been told to go get it. We've been told a humanistic message. I mean, how are you going to climb up into the Trinity? And so, man, it's a whole different world when you get the gospel, man. I mean, it is you realize no separation. I don't have to have a dry season. I'm connected to the wine vine. There's no distance, no delay, no postponement. It's all done. And man, that is the constant foundation. What I go to, I can just stay there, right? I don't have to move from that. There's that for me is the bedrock. That's the source that I'm constantly drinking from. Is that it's already done. Jesus has already brought me in. I may not feel like it right now, but it's still true. And the more I meditate on that and realize that, the more I may get the goosebump. But that's probably was the biggest question for years, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
But we get lots of different questions these days, from lots of different theological perspectives. Now that people are actually listening to what we're saying, and not just looking, that's the guy in the clown outfit who rolls on the floor. They actually have realized he actually has something to say every now and then.
Totally. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so if you're at an airport in some random city, you're just on a layover, and someone strikes up a conversation with you, a stranger, and they ask you, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
Ooh, it depends on if I want to have a conversation for the entire flight or if I want to sleep, I think.
Well, let's say you're at the airport and you've got like 20 minutes before they're going to call your flight.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a good question, because I think I'm going to work around this. I'm going to dodge the question a little bit. But I think we've been so keyed into that 3-minute evangelism thing from way back in the day, where it's like, here's the points, and you give your 3-minute testimony, or you give the 4 spiritual laws or whatever, which are absolute nonsense, by the way. But we won't get into that. So I think as we get out of that formulaic attempt at sort of, and I'm not saying that you were asking how to evangelize question, but I think it tends to go with that for a lot of people. I think as we get out of that, trying to count conversions, and this is a McLaren quote from way back, but he said we shouldn't count conversions, but what if we started counting conversations? And so I think as a preacher, I know that as soon as I tell them I'm a preacher, it's going to go to like this deep spiritual thing, and all their God and daddy wounds are going to pop up, and they're either going to hate me or love me. So I don't, it's going to be, it can be a crazy thing to tell people. As soon as you say you're a man of the cloth, they've got this image in their mind. So I try to avoid that if I can, and just have a conversation with somebody about something. And then if it opens up, then it opens up. And a lot of times they're surprised. They're like, well, you're a preacher? So I like that, if I can catch somebody off guard. So rather than having a formulaic approach to things, I try to avoid the question if I can, or I'll just dodge it a bit.
I'm trying to imagine what that sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm kidding. I mean, you feel like you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
So, do you ever tell them you're anything other than a preacher or a man of the cloth, or is that like the answer?
I'll sometimes try to stay neutral. I'll say like I'm a writer or something like that. Yeah, I think we sort of try to pawn Jesus off like vacuum salesmen a lot of times, and it's like, what if we made it harder for people? They're like, hey, what is this about you? What is this great week you have? And you're like, why do you ask? It's like, dude, we have like the golden ticket, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We have this valuable thing, and we kind of like pimp it out in a way that it's like annoys people, like an Amway salesman or something. And like, I think that like we could minister to people so much more deeply if we really connect out of this love place. And I'm not saying like you're like afraid to talk about the gospel. I'm not talking about that, but just not in this proselytizing way. Now, obviously, you guys here with Bethel, you've got all this amazing power evangelism and presence evangelism stuff. It's just absolutely amazing, because you're giving people an experience and an encounter, and that's a really powerful thing as well. But I think in terms of the conversations, if it comes up, for me as a minister, all I have to say is I'm a minister, and the conversation's there. So I just try to ease into it a little more carefully if I can. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so now you and your wife Lily.
Yeah.
You guys have been married for a while.
Yeah.
I imagine you have different senses of humor.
Yeah, but I think we both have a pretty good sense of humor. I'm probably a little more obnoxious. Sarcasm is my love language.
Okay.
And so people have to get that after a while, because I really I'm not as mean as I seem on YouTube, but but one-on-one, and they realize, oh, that's just how we roll,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I would say like some of the opinions I've heard about you, especially before I'd ever actually looked you up or read your book or anything, there were some strong negative opinions about you from people around me who I was like, I don't even know you. Like, what are you saying about this guy? And, they've just had such strong opinions about how, like, heretical you might be, or disrespectful, or like...
Oh, yeah, well, I'm thinking of some other names and terms from our list before. He's antinomian, he's universalist, he's on drugs. He teaches people to eat raw meat. Seriously, that's one I heard. I do like sushi. I'm talking some crazy stuff. When we wore the monk robes, there was an accusation that we went commando underneath the monk robes, so that when people were drunk in the spirit on the floor, we could step over ladies' heads or something.
What?
The most bizarre things you could think of, right? So it's just, you realize after a while that, like, if I really did do something bad, it'd just be a wash in the other stuff.
We would never know.
It's kind of scary. Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was going to say, like, from what I've heard from people who actually know you, they're all like, no, John's really cool. He's down to earth. He's humble. He's kind. He's gracious, blah, blah. And it's so different from people who, like, just had such strong opinions and seem to be the most vocal about who and what you were, what you were about.
Yeah.
There's, like, such an interesting contrast there. Why do you think we're jumping to such strong conclusions about people in general? Obviously, that's not just for you, but...
Yeah. Well, we do live in a very outraged society anyways. I mean, on social media, you get so much polarity and difference and infighting and things. And I think with anybody, it's if you sat down with them, you wouldn't just be fighting in these one-liner posts. It's like you'd realize this is a real human being, and they're actually pretty cool, and I could hang out with them even though they voted for this other person or whatever, you know. So I think that there's something about really connecting with somebody individually that some of that stuff gets disarmed, I believe.
Totally.
Yeah. It's difficult when you have a platform and you're putting materials and teaching out there that people may disagree with, and it's easy to pick things apart or take little sound bites and that sort of thing and sort of dehumanize.
Yeah. Do you feel like the social media thing has dramatically impacted your ministry, positively or negatively?
Yeah. Well, back in 2008, this was right after YouTube had only been out like 2 or 3 years, and I don't know if you ever saw this documentary that was done on this television station. It was called Current TV. It was owned by Al Gore. It's owned by Al Jazeera now, but they did a documentary on me called The YouTube Prophet. And so suddenly I was the YouTube prophet. But it did really have open up this social media. Back in those days, you know, everybody was on YouTube. This was even before Facebook was really that big. It definitely opened a lot of platform doors, that were helpful in a sense of getting the message out, I think. But it just in the same way that it's helpful, it's also harmful. It's like a printing press. You could print good or bad on it. It's a tool that could be used obviously for good or evil, but
totally. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so I know you've got your hands in a lot of different things. You have many projects ongoing that you're doing.
Sure.
Traveling and speaking all over, leading mission trips, writing books, doing your YouTube videos, and a monthly conference?
We do a monthly web conference also.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if people were like, okay, where do I go to just sink my teeth into John Crowder stuff, where would be a great resource to point them to?
Our website, thenewmystics.com, that's thenewmystics.com. That's, you know, obviously the launch pad for all of our stuff. We got orphanages, we're doing, like you said, mission trips, the web conferences, so many different things.
Is all that found on thenewmystics.com?
All that's there, our event page, all that stuff. Yeah.
So if you guys, we're going to put the link down below, but thenewmystics.com is John Crowder's ministry page, right? Yeah. Which has all that place, all the things there. He's got a great YouTube channel, The Jesus Trip. That cartoon, by the way.
That's nice.
How did that happen?
Yeah. I got a great friend who's an amazing animator. His name is Bishoy, and he's from the UK, Bishoy Gindi, and he actually animates for Cartoon Network and all these. So,
wow.
Yeah, he put a lot of time into that. Yeah. So thank God he gave me that pro bono, because I probably couldn't have afforded it. That's awesome. That's proper animation he did. Yeah, it's really nice.
So you guys, John's putting out a lot of great content. Follow him on Facebook. Are you on Instagram?
You are. On Instagram, yeah.
I actually watched a few of your stories, videos a bit ago of you just like going through your day and stuff that you do, and you put stuff on with your kids sometimes, and it's like hilarious. Follow him on social media, so Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
All of it.
So into his ministry. He's doing some amazing things across the planet, just legitimately helping humanity and teaching them the truth about who Jesus is and what he did and what it does to us. It's amazing. I so believe in and endorse this man. Please, whatever you have to give and can contribute, help him do what he's doing. He's awesome. John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, comment, subscribe, you guys. And what's the most offensive thing you heard John say today? Put that in the comments below. We'd love to know it. And
I was on my best behavior, I think. Hey, thanks for having me on, too.
Totally,
Appreciate
my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for being with us, guys.
Yeah.